Hello everyone, I hope you're good and doing well. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, commenting and liking. Now the good news is that the international media is now picking up the stories that are happening in Uganda, especially about kidnaps, abductions and killings that are taking place in our beautiful country. Now, you could all understand that these kidnappings have been taking place, and the international media, some of them have tried to push it, but the world has not been listening, especially Museveni's biggest donors as well as financiers. Now, what is interesting today is that uh, the international media is not only looking at Museveni, but they are also looking past Museveni. And that is something that we have been fighting for ever since we started doing this kind of work. Because whenever you concentrate only on Museveni, it takes away the entire picture of these other people that are actually enabling him, that are actually participating in all these kind of things. Now, amongst those peoples, we understand that Museveni's son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, is one of them. And the international media had not actually given this gentleman a lot of attention. But now, the fact that Muhoozi, the crown dictator, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, is now being targeted by the international media. That is really, really good news. That is coming up in one way or the other. Now, according to the article in The Guardian, I'll just share it with you right now. Just a minute. Yes, according to this article in The Guardian, like you can see, Ugandan president's son named in ICC complaint over abductions and abuse. Yes, we all know that this complaint has been there for a while, and we all understand that this complaint had been lodged, and of course, Muhoozi had been, had been lodged into this complaint. So it doesn't come as news in one way or the other. But what is interesting is the fact that now Muhoozi is becoming a center of attention. For all of you who don't know about who Muhoozi is the crown dictator, and he is also Museveni's only son that we know of. There might be more other children. Dictators. No dictator can have. You are not a full dictator if you don't have multiple children, wives, and all this kind of thing. But the crown dictator has been put away out of the public eye in one way or the other. But now, as things are happening, we are starting to see that he is getting into the international media and also into the international media discourse, and that is really good news. Now, let us go through this article and see what it says. I've of recent seen this crown dictator doing so many things on the internet, meeting ambassadors and all this kind of thing. And I was always wondering, why is the crown dictator meeting all these people? Ambassadors and taking pictures. Well, all this all of a sudden makes sense. And maybe we hadn't paid too much attention on this case. But let us go through this article and see what the crown dictator says. Now, the Guardian says Ugandan dictator, not president, dictator's son named in ICC case complaint over abductions and abuse. Muhoozi, crown dictator Muhoozi Kainerugaba, leads the Special Forces Command, an elite military unit blamed for widespread abuses. Now, this so-called the Special Forces Command is an illegitimate military outfit, number one. Number two, whoever heads this so-called special forces, it has had different names in the past. The Presidential Guard Brigade, PGB, and all this kind of thing. They have a license to kill. They are above the law. They can do anything they want. They are more armed than the army itself. Because this is Museveni's personal bodyguard or protection unit. Him and the first family. They are even more armed than the army. The army are given these Kalashnikovs. These people are having those Israel guns. They are the ones that they use, those people. They eat good food. They have insurance. They are well catered for, the so-called SFC. And they do whatever they want at their own will. You do not question their judgment or anything. Anyone within the SFC has a lot of power. Now, this unit is now headed by Muhoozi Kainerugaba. that his predecessor was put on sanctions and recommended for Magnitsky sanctions. The predecessor before him was also put on sanctions, which is really interesting. Now, the fact that they have also put this warning, graphic information in this report may upset some readers. That is really good now to bring out the real picture. And you know, the Guardian is not here to make propaganda and here to make, to exaggerate the entire thing. Now, it says, lawyers acting for the victims of a wave of abductions and torture by security forces in Uganda have named the senior military commanders, including the president's son, the dictator's son, in a complaint to the International Criminal Court. Prosecutors at the ICC are already reviewing an earlier submission from the opposition politician Kyagulanyi, the former reggae singer known as Bobi Wine, describing white human rights abuses before presidential polls held in January. If you go back in my archive of the stories I've been covering, you will find that we covered that story whereby I think it was Bruce Afran and some other gentleman. It's either Bruce Afran or Femi Felani, the Nigerian human rights lawyer, who petitioned the ICC to do something about the human rights situation in Uganda. And it is really good that now they are petitioning, or they are handing over another petition, this time that is involving more senior officers, as well as the son of the crown dictator, the son of the dictator. And a former reggae singer known as Bobi Wine, describing widespread human rights abuses. There is a petition that was there before, and now they are putting out another petition. Now, Dictator Museveni claimed victory in the vote, which was marred by allegations of fraud and death of at least 50 people during the protests. Now, to make some bit of correction here, there were over 60 people that were killed during those. They were not even protests, but these people were just murdered, technically executed. Most were shot by security forces. Not most were shot by the security forces. They were all shot by security forces. There is no civilian in Uganda who owns a gun. Guns are owned by Museveni's militia, the LDU, the SFC, that is his private, his private security company, as well as the army. Those ones who are given, it is the only army in Africa that is armed. It is an army, but it's not even armed. Okay, armed in the way of army, right? So we see that these are the people that actually killed. Most were shot by security forces. All were shot by security forces, not most, all. Now, Kyagulanyi's National Unity Platform party has listed more than 600 members and activists said to have been detained. NUP officials believe the true figure is likely to be higher. It has been difficult to identify the masked men or vehicles used in abductions, as well as torturers and guards in prison. However, lawyers, campaigners, and victims blame the Special Forces Command, SFC, an elite military unit for many of the abuses. The new complaint, also filed on behalf of Kyagulanyi, will be submitted to the ICC this week. The SFC is commanded by Dictator Museveni's 47-year-old son, Lieutenant General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is named in the complaint along with senior officers. In Uganda today, the civil function is subverted in favor of the military that patrols all towns and cities. The complaint alleges the military maintains power of arrest over civilians who are held on vague and indeterminate charges. Quote, end quote. The complaint describes hundreds of abductions. Some detainees have had their joints and genitals beaten with wires, have been burned with cigarettes or fingernails torn out. At least one detainee has been confirmed as having died in custody, although the death toll is thought to be much higher. Many of these abducted have suffered significant and potentially lasting physical and psychological harm. The Ugandan military spokespeople have repeatedly denied responsibility of any abuses, and Museveni, in a national address on Friday, dismissed allegations that his forces had illegally detained civilians, saying the army was a disciplined force. I won't even go there. And that his party does not kill its opponents. Okay. Major Jimmy Omara, the spokesperson of the SFC unit, told The Guardian that allegations against the unit and its commanders were baseless. There are no abductions. These are normal arrests. Operations here are managed and controlled by the police force, so I don't see where the SFC would be involved, he said. However, in a letter dated on the 23rd of February that was sent to the Monitor newspaper, Museveni stated that the SFC had held more than 50 civilians without charge since November. Now, those held, quote, have been with SFC, helping them to expose the whole criminal scheme of elements of the opposition, plus their local parasite and foreign backers, Museveni said. The 78-year-old dozing despot authoritarian ruler, who has been in power since 1986, also acknowledged that he had reinforced security ahead of the elections by deploying forces who killed a few people, quote, killed a few people he described as terrorists. Quote, because of misbehaviors and plan to stop the elections, the security forces deployed heavily. In the case of Kampala, we brought in commando units that had been exemplary in Somalia. They killed a few terrorists who were here, end quote, he said. On March the 4th, the Minister of Internal Affairs, Genoje Jodong, told the parliament that 177 people were in detention on military charges and military custody. The allegations will draw attention to the long-standing relationship between the military and Western powers, which have seen Uganda as a royal ally in a volatile region. The SFC was set up in 2011 and trained in 2014 and 2015 by US Naval SEALs. Muhoozi was its commander at this time. The training covered close counters combat, sniper operations, and combat casualty care, among other topics. The unit then was sent to Somalia as part of AMISOM, a multinational force deployed by the African Union to fight Islamic militant insurgents. Quote, people we are dealing with in Somalia, they have trained in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, so you need people who can fight behind lines, Omara said. Some Special Forces troops were brought back to Uganda before campaigning began last year for the January elections, and the opposition officials say deployed to intimidate Chagulanyi's supporters and activists before, during, and after the poll. Now, after stepping down to serve as a national security advisor in 2017, Crown dictator Muhoozi was reappointed commander of the SFC in December, a move some critics said signaled a possible escalation of opposition harassment. He is also a presidential advisor on special operations. Now, lawyers acting for Chagulanyi say the abuses amount to systematic violations of human rights law. Bruce Afran, the US-based lawyer who has drawn up the new complaint on behalf of Chagulanyi, said, our request is the crown dictator's son, the crown dictator to be charged. Muhoozi Kainerugaba is the commander of the SFC, the unit that Museveni himself identified as involved in the abductions, and as such is responsible for their actions. Pause. The same unit is also the one that is the same unit was the one that was trained by the Americans. So literally the Americans are training the SFC or are training Ugandan military to beat up, kill, abduct, and do all these sorts of things to Ugandans. Now, if you're in the US or if you're an American, please hear the plight of Ugandans, because your government is arming, is training, and doing all these sorts of things in the name of fighting terrorists, and yet these people are not fighting any terrorists, but they are actually literally killing fellow citizens, and that is absolutely unacceptable. Bruce Afran, the unit that Museveni identified himself and blah blah blah, he can't just, Bruce Afran continues to say, he can't just hide under the principle he was carrying out an order. Quote, the consistent playbook is that they hold these people and eventually some make statements that are false under duress. You remember that Muslim guy they caught and they said that He was one of the people who has been killing people in Kampala. Then they waterboarded him, and they did sleep deprivation. All these things that have been, condemned by, that are not even acceptable. How can you waterboard someone? So sad. And this is the fault of the US and these Western donors and powers who are enabling Museveni's erratic behavior. A 75-year-old gentleman, whatever, he claims to be 75, but in Uganda we know he's officially 80 and above. The guy is not royal about his age, he's not royal about his names, he's not royal about his family, and you think he will be royal about his intentions to deal with the Americans? For a gentleman who has for the past 35 years, he has not been royal about his age. He has not been royal about his names. He has not been royal, and he has broken all the trust that Ugandans gave him. Changed the constitutions over 40 times, and that is a gentleman that you think you can rely on. Cases listed in the complaint include that of a 75-year-old woman, Regina Namukasa, who reported that her 3 sons were picked up for unknown offenses by plainclothes operatives on the 6th of January. Jolly Jacqueline Tokamushaba, 45, who was allegedly abducted on 10th January from her home and driven away in a pickup truck. According to her daughter, Tokamushaba had put up Kyagulanyi campaign posters inside their house and was working at a local non-government organization. The family reported the matter to the police, who said they had no information on her whereabouts. In another case, Ronald Segawa, 22, was found left for dead at a mortuary in Mulago in January, but rescued by the staff. His condition and injuries suggested he had been stabbed and electrocuted and had had his nails removed and fingers broken, with one snapped off at the joint. The US provides almost $1 billion annually in development and security assistance to Uganda, and officials in Washington say, quote, a key role in supporting the professionalization of the military. What the? In 2018, US officials said the US Embassy in Kampala had not worked with the SFC since early 2016 because of human rights concerns. This month, the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, announced that visa restrictions would be imposed on those responsible for recent human rights abuses. Uganda received more than £150 million of British aid last year, the highest total for a decade, as well as funding for human rights training for police and prison service. The British government had said that though its armed forces continued to provide assistance to the Uganda's military, none had been given to the SFC. Now, pause. Because these two governments, the Americans, are saying they have not given Museveni, or they have not trained the SFC since 2016. Is that what they said? They said that since 2016, they had not worked with the SFC since 2016. Now, here is the trick. Because you see the problem with these Western donors, they have one problem. They like to think that Museveni is stupid. That's what they think. Because if you say SFC is just a name, UPDF is just a name. So do you know all the SFC soldiers? Do you know all the so-called 40 or 60,000 soldiers? So what stops Museveni from bringing you SFC soldiers under the guise of UPDF soldiers? And for you will be training, saying, oh no, we are training the military, not the SFC. You think Museveni is going to tell you that, oh, this is the SFC? Come on, guys. You either know these things and you're just complicit, or you are thinking that Museveni is stupid and maybe you are being taken for a ride. Because look here, me personally, if you ban my SFC, my private military, I know you don't know each and every one in the private military. So what will I do? I will bring these people in the SFC and put them and make them wear the Uganda UPDF, People's Defense Forces attire, and I tell you, oh, these are UPDF, train them. So you think all along you've been training the military, yet you've been training the SFC. All training should cease. If you want to help Ugandans, all training of the Ugandan military and the equipping of the Ugandan military should cease, effective immediately. Otherwise, what you're doing, you're just enabling this gentleman to kill us, kidnap us, and abduct us. That is what is happening. And these people are complicit. The US knows exactly what they are doing. You cannot tell me that you have the FBI, you have the CIA. One of the, some of the best intelligence organizations in the world, and you don't tell, and you come here and you tell me that you don't know that you have been training the SFC under the guise of the UPDF. You cannot tell me that you have Scotland Yard, you have M16, some of the biggest or the best intelligence agencies in the world, and then you come here and say, no, we have not been training the SFC, we have been training the military. So what is the, even me in Uganda, I can easily tell you that, look here, guy, Museveni just changed the clothes. He just changed the outfits. So how many SFC soldiers do you know? Does the US, does the UK, does the CIA, FBI, M16, and all these other agencies, do they know the number of SFC, the number of SFC troops that Museveni has? There are over 70,000. There are over 7,000 troops in the SFC. Over 7,000 troops. Does the US know all of them? So do you know what they do? They just come and they say, Museveni just easily changes their IDs, changes their names, and you go for training. The US, these people know these things. The US knows that they have been training the Ugandan SFC, only that they are looking the other way. They just look the other way. That's all they are doing. And secondly, all of a sudden is that they just don't care. It is really sad that they are coming up with this excuse that no, we have not been training the Ugandan military, but we have not been training the SFC, but we have been training the military. Come on. Do not take us for fools. If you are not willing to work with the Ugandan people, if you're not willing to fight for the plight of the Ugandan people, just come out openly and say, we are in support of the dictator Museveni, and Ugandans will find other ways. And look, I'm not saying that Ugandans are counting on you, but Ugandans are just calling on these countries to do what is right, to do what they espouse to uphold with high regard. That is human rights, democracy, rule of law, and freedom of speech and expression. You cannot say that you're fighting for freedom of speech and expression. You cannot say that you're fighting for human rights, and at the same time you're giving these people support and still training them and saying, no, we are not training, but we are training the military. Really? We are not fools. We are not stupid. Ugandans are not stupid. Ugandans are not fools. The British government has said that though its armed forces continue to provide assistance to Uganda's military, none had been given to the SFC. You see, it's the same rhetoric with the Americans. They are giving the military. The US has provided significant support for AMISOM, and the Uganda Special Forces and other units have worked closely with the Ugandan and other troops. The Ugandans provided the largest contingent in the multinational force with 6,000 troops stationed in Somalia. A spokesperson of the US Africa Command said it had conducted training engagements with the Ugandan forces in 2014, 15, and 16, and that engagements with the Ugandan forces in Somalia continued. Now, that is it. As you can see, the reason as to why we are calling upon the United States of America, as well as the British government, it is because that we believe in our hearts that they are people in these countries that if they hear what their governments are doing in Uganda, what their governments are doing in Africa, they will pressure their governments to do something about it. That is why you see me always talking about the US, talking about these things, because these are things that are happening at a very, the highest of levels, that we are supposed to open up for the entire African continent. We are supposed to open up for the entire world to see, to know, and to show Museveni that, we now know your tricks. We have been fighting you at the battlefront only in Uganda, but we don't know who has been enabling you from the back. Now, what is happening here, when you're coding, there is what you call the front end, and then there is what you call the back end. Now, what you see at the front end in coding, the website you see, the Facebook you see, the Twitter you see, and all this kind of thing, it is as a result of what is happening in the back end. Because without the back end, you can't have the front. Everything is controlled from the back. Like when you're coding and building websites and this kind of thing, that is what happens. Now, to change anything on the front, you need to go in the back. You cannot change anything in politics without looking at the back. You cannot change anything within dictatorships without looking on who is enabling what Museveni is doing today, who is training his soldiers, who is arming his soldiers, who is giving him financial aid, who is giving him all this donor money. That is what you're supposed to do. Because if you don't do that, what is most likely to happen is people are, whatever happens on the front is nothing is going to change on the front. Nothing is going to change on the front. Now, let us look at a few tweets on Muhoozi that show that the gentleman has been running helter-skelter because he knew this was coming. Now, as you can see here, on the February the 26th, Muhoozi met the ambassador, German ambassador, Matthias Schur, at Serena Hotel. Now, as you can see the way he met the ambassador, a worried crown dictator meeting with the ambassador of Germany. As you can see the pictures, everyone is in laissez-faire attire. The other ones, I don't know if that is Muhoozi's girl, and then there's this so-called Andrew Mwenda. Now, Muhoozi, of course, is trying to bust these sanctions. He's trying to bust, these kind of things that are they are being brought against him and his father, the dictator-in-chief and this crown dictator. Now, Muhoozi, what he's doing is they are trying to fight it out on the European front, as well as the UK front, as well as the American front. That is why you are seeing that they are engaging ambassadors. Now, one thing that I've learned in international diplomacy, as well as one thing I've learned in international politics, especially in a situation like Uganda, the ambassadors really, their views don't count when it comes to these governments, right? Because Muhoozi no longer has access to the European Union Parliament. They no longer have access to the UK. No one in the UK wants to receive a phone call from the dictator who just killed 60 people. No one in America wants to receive a phone call or an email from these people, because if you have it in your archives, it will surface and it will destroy your career. So now what Muhoozi is doing is, through this gentleman known as Andrew Mwenda, another propagandist, he is going through ambassadors to see if at all there is something they could do. But the ambassadors do not know what is taking place in these other countries. The ambassadors are only there to represent what these countries give them. And the only other thing that they do maybe is to give them a report on a few things here and there. Unless if at all you have a CIA or an FBI station chief in Kampala that is actually sharing intelligence and all this kind of thing. Those are the people who make actually a lot of decisions in one way or the other. But ambassadors, not so much. That is why you see him now. You can see that ambassador there with the Muhoozi, and I think this one did not bear fruit. Now, what is interesting is Muhoozi has now started building his own structures and memorabilia or something of that, busts and all kind of stuff. Anyway, this is him with the Turkish. Now, this Turkish, of course, I wouldn't say much about them. Now here he is meeting the Italian ambassador, Mazzanti, His Excellency, whatever, Mazzanti is the Italian ambassador. Now Italy is the only country that has come out to congratulate Mussolini. But even if you look at Italy, it is one of those desperate countries in Europe. It was ravaged with COVID-19 and all this kind of thing that is happening. And Italy is not one country that you hold high regard in putting, in saying that it's a big economy, that even if it boycotted Uganda or it put sanctions on Museveni and these people, that they would even make any effect, because Italy all of a sudden doesn't even give any kind of support or money to the country. So Mazzanti and his fellow Muhoozi, you can see them speaking, but there is nothing much that Mazzanti can do for Muhoozi to save him from the ICC. Now these are the Chinese and all this kind of stuff. Now all of a sudden Muhoozi has this is him meeting Econ, trying to polish his image, meeting Econ, that they're discussing issues. This is all just for show. You see, like the crown dictator is now copying exactly his father, taking pictures, and then like the dictator in chief, he always takes pictures outside State House. Now they built this so-called this building. They named it Museveni, and then they put Museveni's statue here, as you can see. It is like Kim Jong-un or whatever. It's like a North Korean statue. Now this was when Ekon visited, and he came to see the crown dictator, and now the crown dictator is all of a sudden taking pictures with these people trying to build up his international image. Or he even gets involved in saying R.I.P. So funny that he says R.I.P. to Prince Philip that he doesn't even know about, but he just wants to show the world that, oh, I'm very concerned about the passing of Prince Philip, but I'm not concerned about the Ugandans I'm actually murdering, executing, and killing, and he's concerned about other dictators who are also dying. Now you can see here again this German ambassador Shura. The German ambassador, I think, is reaping some money out of this gentleman, out of the crown dictator. You know, there are also these people. Not all ambassadors are well off. Not all ambassadors are doing well. Some of them might be coming close to you for their, because they are not stupid. They are also coming close to you for their own personal interests in one way or the other. So to see the crown dictator always, standing with the same ambassadors, the one of Germany and the other one of Italy, there isn't much that is going on. There isn't much discussion because Muhoozi will say, "Please help me. I don't want to be taken to the ICC. What can you do?" The ambassador has no right to stop that. He cannot stop it, even if he phones the German chancellor or whatever, the German president. They cannot stop it. They cannot stop Muhoozi from going to the ICC if he committed human rights abuses, if he killed people. Can't happen. So Mazanti and this Shora Matthias, for these people, they think, why can't Muhoozi leave the country and come to these countries and discuss these issues? He knows he will be arrested. When was the last time he left the country? So as you can see, that is him. Now, yesterday they opened up a building for him and named it Muhoozi Kainerugaba Complex. Just like his dictator father, he's now opening up his own buildings. Now, this is a building named after Muhoozi Kainerugaba. Oh, this is just public relations. You get it? I'm sorry to say, but he doesn't even look good in a combat. You know? So, as you can see, this is Kainerugaba administration broke. And this is where the US money goes. Instead of putting money in the armies from Somalia and all this kind of thing, this is what they do. They are using the US support, they are using the American support, they are using the British support and the European Union support to build the structures for themselves, as well as build their own statues and things of that sort. So now they have started naming administration blocks by after their names. The irony. I mean, they are now going to start naming their kids. They are going to rename Ugandan streets and the buildings and all these kind of things. All those things are going to be renamed after their kids and grandchildren and kids who are not even yet born. Such is true for dictators. I mean, the cult of personality is really, really alarming, as you can see there. I don't know why he even, crown dictator. Anyway, guys, as I wind this thing up, I want to remind you about something. Why the fight to sanction Museveni and why the ICC should involve, why it is important. Look here. When Ronald Reagan came to power in 1981, January 20th, right? There's a situation that was taking place on the continent, and that was apartheid in South Africa. Now, his predecessor, Jimmy Carter, had made strides to counter apartheid, whereby he had put sanctions, he had isolated the apartheid government, and he was leading towards putting pressure on the apartheid government by then in South Africa to make sure that they come and sit on the table with the majority blacks on how to proceed with the country. Now, Ronald Reagan comes to power, a conservative. You know what he does? He takes everything back that Carter had done, who was a Democrat, and then he says that, no. Because the anti-apartheid protesters in America and all these other countries in the world had said that the US should do a few things. Number one, to disinvest in South Africa. Number two, to cut off all aid. Number three, to stop all training and military assistance that we are giving to South Africa to fight the war in Namibia, as well as the war in the neighboring areas of Namibia and Rhodesia and Angola, right? Now, this is what happened. Because for Reagan, he thought that, okay, look here, I have to fight this communism and end it once and for all. So I will support apartheid so that I can get the South African troops to engage the communists in Angola. Now, when Reagan did that, people, the black people, and the massacre of black people, and the humiliation, abductions, kidnaps, and killing of black people in South Africa intensified during the apartheid era. So the anti-apartheid coalition in the diaspora called on for the US to disinvest. By disinvestment, they meant that the US should reduce, number one, either reduce or stop investing in South Africa so as to cripple the economy in order to force the apartheid government to sit on the table with the black majority. Now, Reagan was against that. You know what Reagan did? He said, no, 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 no. Sanctioning and putting all these kind of economic restrictions and doing all these disinvestment campaigns will only hurt the very people that we are trying to help. It is the same argument that is being used almost 40 years later, whereby when Ugandans call upon the US to sanction Museveni, to cut all aid on Museveni, they say that no, 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 the aid that is going to hurt the very people that we want to help. It is the same argument. Now look here what happened in America. This is what happened. Reagan gave an alternative and said, what we have to do is constructive engagement. Now, his policy or his idea of constructive engagement meant that they will use appeasement to this apartheid government to, give them a few incentives, more weapons, more aid, more stuff, more training, so that they can bring them on the table. It is the same thing we see today, whereby the UK claims to be training the Ugandan security forces in human rights, where the US claims to be training the Ugandan security forces as well as the Ugandan military in human rights and giving them aid to counter the terrorists, to give them more aid. And yet more Ugandans are getting killed. It is exactly what Ronald Reagan did 40 years ago through his policy of constructive engagement. Now, in constructive engagement, Reagan includes financial support, economic support, as well as military support to the apartheid government. And guess who suffered the most? It was the black South Africans. Because these people were enabling, were giving the apartheid government life. Instead of cleaning it out, they were giving it life because of their so-called interests in Angola. What were the interests? Just to counter communists. Now, in here, Uganda, it is the same. They are giving Museveni life under the guise of he is helping out in the region, that he is helping out in South Sudan, he is helping out in Somalia, of which that is not true. Museveni has taken them for a ride. Now, with constructive engagement, all of a sudden, Botha and his counterparts in South Africa, they intensified the campaign to clamp down on Africans. So as a matter of fact, it got so bad that people in America were like, you know what, Mr. What do you call him? Mr. Reagan, we are not going to stand with you on this issue. So the Republicans, as well as the Democrats, passed an anti-apartheid act. It was called the Anti-Apartheid Act, Anti-Apartheid Comprehensive Act, I think of 1986. It received a lot of bipartisan support, both within the Republicans as well as the Democrats. It passed both in the House of Representatives as well as in the Senate with overwhelming majority. Reagan's own Republicans turned against him. And he pleaded to them, please do not, don't. They refused. They said, Reagan, you are completely out of your mind. How can you support such a policy? And it was during the era of civil rights. Now, this is what happened. Reagan realized that, okay, you guys have done this. I will veto the sanctions. So he vetoed the sanctions, literally. When these people voted in favor of sanctions and all this kind of thing, through the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act, Reagan vetoed them. And he blocked them. He increased the aid and all this kind of thing. The people were like, you know what? I think you're joking with us. They went back, and this time overwhelmingly, even the people who had voted for him the very first time, this time they switched sides. And they said, this has to be done once and for all. So the law passed. In the end, the US withdrew all the support it was giving the apartheid regime, all the investment, and so on and so forth. Now, It is not to say that the withdrawal of the support is the one that led to the end of apartheid. No, 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 no. Of course, there are so many other factors. But this was very, very paramount. Just like I've told you, whenever you're coding, you're always in the back end. There are so many keys that there are so many keys that you're typing in, so many keys that bring out something that you see today, that bring out a website or something beautiful, that you use that is useful. So all those keys now, the American support, the British support, and the Western support that they were giving to South Africa was enabling this draconian policy of apartheid. And by the US pulling out, other countries followed, like Japan, uh, United Kingdom, and so many others. So we need to go back to in history and understand these things. We need to see why it is important to engage these people. That is why it is important to put them on pressure. Because somewhere within America, somewhere within Britain, somewhere within the European Union, there are people who will feel the pride, who will be concerned with what is going on or with what is happening with the people of Uganda, with what is happening with the people of Ethiopia in Tigray region, with what is happening with the people of Somalia, with what is happening with the people of Zimbabwe, on the entire continent. We shouldn't stop. We know that these people support these guys. That is why we also have to engage them. We have to go into the back end and engage them. Because some people may say, oh no, the US won't do. Yeah, we don't want to. Yeah, we know they won't do anything about the gentleman. But that doesn't mean that we should stop pushing. The moment Ugandans, the moment Ethiopians, the moment Somalis, the moment all these other people that are going through all this struggle stop fighting, that is the moment the dictator, or that is the moment these autocrats and these people will also say that, yes, we have won the battle. And the battle doesn't have to be fought on only the Ugandan battlefront, the Somali battlefront, the Zimbabwean battlefront, or the Rwandan battlefront, or the Zairean battlefront, or the Chadian, not just in Africa. My argument is the battle does not only have to be fought on the continent of Africa, the battle has to be fought in the entire diaspora. That's how these things are going to change. That's how the continent is going to change. As we speak right now, the continent has been riddled with a very big virus. The continent is becoming less democratic, more authoritarian, as well as more despotic and dictatorial. That's what is happening. What is going to happen in 10 or 15 years' time? We shall be having dictators completely and also. Now, what that calls for is people who are outside in the diaspora. We are the ones that are supposed to make sure that, because we are out, Africa has become a prison for those who fight for democracy, for those who fight for the rule of law. It has become a prison. So we are out of the prison. And those who are out of the prison are the ones that are supposed to fight and get our brothers and sisters out of these prisons. We thank the Guardian for sharing this article and putting it up and showing exactly what is happening in Uganda. By Uganda being in the international discourse with such articles that go even further than Museveni, going up to the crown son, it is really a big step, and it is really something that is huge for the people who are fighting for freedom in Uganda. Thank you very much for listening to me on this episode. I do appreciate everyone who subscribes, who shares, and who likes my work. Please, ladies and gentlemen, if you like my work, do not, you can give it a thumbs up, comment, let me. I always like you guys when you thank me in the comments, but I would also like to know your ideas or your take on some of my things that I speak about and some of my ideas and some of the articles that I talk about. I always like to know what your take is as well. Do not forget to subscribe. Do not forget to share. We shall be covering, well, we are going to be covering mostly what is happening on the continent of Africa. Oh, sorry, what is happening in Uganda, and also bringing in a few things on what is happening on the continent. So, without further ado, I think I would like to stop here and wish you the very best of the week. We shall be bringing you more episodes. I'm now working so hard to bring more and more episodes as much as I can. So stay tuned to the channel. Have a nice week. Bye.